Hi, everybody. Today we're going to go over some more record keeping so that you're prepared to do your taxes, because that's what I'm working on right now. A couple of quick notes first. Monkey bandage. This was a shaving accident. Sorry about that. That's a little bit fresh, so I'm leaving the band-aid on. Um, let's see. Personally, where I'm at. I think I said in the last video I was able to give the IRS my bank account information for the transfer for the 1200 last week. I still have not received that, but I did get unemployment and a pretty sizable amount too, because it goes back to the beginning of my claim, which was March 15th. So I'm good for rent. I hope you're good for rent. I'm gonna do a little shopping after I post this video, and then make a Zoom hangout. I'll post a link on my Facebook page, so that I'm going to be here anyway, updating my own tax records. So if anybody is panicking about rent, trying to figure out anything about the application process, I'm just hoping to create like a Zoom meeting where we can all chat about that. So keep an eye out for that this late afternoon, evening. Join us, and let's get this all figured out and help each other. So let's see. Record keeping. This is the spreadsheet that I put the link for on my second video, so that you guys can get your record keeping going on your own. Now we're going to get into expenses. So there's a lot of expenses that you can get different deductions for when you go ahead to do your taxes. I'm not going to get into actually calculating those expenses and filling out tax forms in this video. That'll be a separate video, probably in the next couple of days. But for now, go to the expenses tab, and anything you spend money on in the course of your business, right? So for me, instrument repair, for instance, stage wear. Stage wear is any clothing that you wear on stage. So if I buy a cape, that's probably not a thing that I'm just wearing around town. Sometimes I do. You never know. But that was intended for the stage, so I coded as stage wear, and then I get a deduction for that. Advertising would be something like posters. A lot of different things that could fit under advertising. So you want to just type all that stuff in with dates, notes, amounts, and then total them up at the bottom. I do that like individually. And I've got some notes here about where on the Schedule C, like which line all this stuff gets added in. But like I said, we'll get into that later. So total up your advertising, stage wear. Transportation would be like if you took a ferry. Parking and tolls, self-explanatory. Supplies is no longer a thing. The Republicans got rid of it with their recent tax reform, whatever legislation a couple years ago. So it used to be like if you were a teacher and your school was low on supplies and you bought some extra supplies, you could get a deduction for that. You can't do that anymore. I don't know if people have figured out another way to code that, but there's no supplies category as far as I know anymore. So various things that I would have been, buying in the course of my business, no longer covered. No more deduction for that. Repairs are there. I don't know why I've got cable internet here. I think I'm just going to keep that on a different tab. So I also, on this form, I say expenses already reimbursed or covered. Sometimes I'll do, like for instance, the M&IE covers the deduction you get for meals that you buy out of town on business. If I wasn't taking the MINE deduction, I would be itemizing every single sandwich I bought while I was traveling. Sometimes I type them up anyway down here just out of curiosity and just to have a record of that stuff. You can do that if you want to. It's totally optional. It is, if they ever get rid of the M&IE rate, or the way that these deductions are calculated, it would be good to be in the habit, perhaps. But for now, it's just extra work that you don't need to do. So that's what's going on that tab. Business travel. This is the M&IE rates that I was talking about. If you are out of town, 100 miles from home or more, um, for overnight, then you can take a deduction for half of the M&IE rate for that city, whatever city you stayed in. So what that is basically the federal government acknowledging, okay, if you go out of town for business, you're going to have to spend some money. You're going to have to buy some food. Um, you're going to have to, whatever like incidentals you might pay for in the course of being in that town. And there's different rates because different towns are more expensive or cheaper than each other. So what you need to do is write down all your overnight business travel that qualifies. It's 100 miles or more. Um, Once you get it filled out, you go to this page. I just Googled M&IE rate, you know, look up or whatever. I think I even put the letters in the wrong order and it still came up for me. So you're going to get, I'll just show you from the search I did. Per diem rates, GSA. That's the link I clicked on. So you scroll down here and you can search by state, and you want to pick the year that you're doing taxes for. So 2019 in this case. And everything I've got on that sheet right now is Washington, so we'll just fill that out. The first section is lodging. This is different. So these rates are used for all sorts of government employees getting reimbursed for travel, things like that. So the lodging rate doesn't apply in my case. I'm talking about traveling as a musician, being somewhere overnight for a gig. Here's the MINE, MNIE. I always say that wrong. Breakdown. So your standard rate, if you don't see the city that you're looking for, you use the standard rate. So 55. So every city is going to be at least 55. That being the standard rate. More expensive places like Seattle, 76, and Olympia is 66. So I go back here. I go Olympia, 66. Seattle, 76. Twisp, not listed as its own city, 55, standard rate. So this can really add up. I travel about 143, I think it was this year. It's usually in the 140s of nights that I'm gone overnight for work. So you get down to the total here. My total is usually somewhere around $8,000, and you can take half of that as a deduction. So $4,000 deduction off of my taxable income is pretty huge. So do that if you travel. That's important. Here's car stuff, business use of a vehicle. So I use my car all the time for travel. So what I do, and this may not be exactly right, I've got the odometer reading at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. This just subtracts the one from the other to get my total miles traveled. Now, business miles, I'm taking 80% of these miles, saying those are my business miles. That's not really how you're supposed to do it. What you're supposed to do is you have a ledger, a notebook, and you every time you take a business trip, you write it down. You say, here's where I'm going, here's why, here's the date. And then you've got documentation regarding all of your business miles. As a musician, your life is basically your business. So if I go, for instance, if I go to a friend's house for a barbecue, that's not necessarily a business trip, but also it kind of is because that person is a potential customer. Your friends come to your gigs. So, and say that someone at the barbecue asks, "Hey, do you got any shows coming up?" You know, now everyone at the barbecue knows about your show. So you've done something that has the potential to make you money. So in a sense, it is a business trip, going to your friends for a barbecue. It gets really, really blurry in our line of work because, your life is basically your business. So I'm pretty sure you're justified in taking all of your miles as business miles. My I'm a little uncomfortable with that, so I say 80%. That's what I do. And if anyone from the IRS is watching this, I do totally have a ledger where I've written down all of my business miles on a day-to-day basis, that I can produce if I'm ever audited. So this is the standard mileage allowance. Now this is one way, like I said, I'll get into how we calculate all the deductions later, but I use the standard mileage allowance, which is for 2019, it's 58 cents a mile. It'll probably be a lot less for 2020 because gas prices are down so much right now during the pandemic. But these rates change over time. Sometimes they change in the middle of the year, and you have to calculate, the first half versus the second half of the year at different rates. But just check the standard mileage allowance for the year you're doing and make sure that this number's right. Don't just use what's in the spreadsheet necessarily. But in this example, you've got this much showing up in the standard mileage allowance. So that covers things like gas. So the other option would be to actually itemize, document all of your gas expenses and your like vehicle maintenance, stuff like that, right? So if you had a year that was particularly high on those kinds of expenses, you might want to do it that way. That's never been the case for me. It's always been a bigger deduction for me to take the standard mileage allowance. So that's how I do it. Equipment depreciation, I haven't done much with. I just made some notes when I was looking into it, but for instance, if you buy an instrument, it's very expensive. You can depreciate it all at once, or you can depreciate it over a number of years so that you're getting a smaller portion of the discount every year for multiple years. So if you want to do stuff like that, if you're buying a lot of equipment, you figure that out and tell me how it works, because I really haven't done much with it. Home office. So if you have a home office, which is a specific part of your living space that is dedicated to business work, for instance, for me, it would be, if I have a studio like I do in my house where I've got some recording gear and I've got my instruments and I've got basically a place where I do work exclusively. I'm not sitting down there playing video games or whatever. I'm doing music business stuff. That portion of my living space, in this case, I'm saying 10% of my living space is my home office. So I can take 10% of my combined rent and utility expenses, and that's my home office deduction. There's different ways to figure that, and we'll get into that later, but that's why I'm keeping track of this here, so that I get a deduction for that. Also, certain, utilities, internet and phone, are things you use a lot for business. And in terms of like how to separate that from your life, you could, like I said, you could make the argument that 100% of your internet and phone use is business related. I usually end up taking about 50%. And I'm drawing a blank on exactly how you're supposed to track that or what the rules are on that right now. So I'm going to move on. But this is where I track all that stuff. So fill that in, find out, what you're spending on all that kind of stuff, and then use that to figure your deductions. Payouts is the last tab. This is payroll. This is like, for instance, all these people here, we're in a brass band. I got hired to put a brass band together for a Pride Parade. Nordstrom hired us. So we basically they cut me a check, and then I distributed the money to the rest of the band because they just want to deal with one person, right? But the thing is, they cut the check to me personally, and then because it's more than 600, they have to report that on a 1099. So the IRS has a 1099 from Nordstrom saying we paid this guy $4,000. So the IRS is expecting me to say, hey, I made $4,000 and here's the taxes on that. Well, I don't want to pay taxes on $4,000 that I just gave out mostly to a bunch of other people. So this is where I track the payments that I made, where that money actually went, right? And if, like I said, if it's more than 600 in a year, to any one person, you have to file a 1099. but that didn't happen in this case. So that's where I track payroll. And I think that's it for now. We're gonna, like I said, we'll get into specifics of how to fill out your tax forms in the next video. But for now, thanks for watching. And should have got some water. Thanks for watching. Hope you're all doing well. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these. And like I said, if you're working on getting your financial stuff in order and trying to pay your rent, join us in a little bit later tonight for a little hangout, and let's help each other out. Thanks. Bye.